So today we're looking at calibration tips for your Luxedo or your Lux Omni. Calibration is one of those setup steps that you do as you're getting your projector ready to roll, and it's a necessary step. But hopefully, some of these tips will help make it smoother so that you can get to the fun part of transforming your house and creating some magic. So these are some tips that I've gotten from my own experience and from the Luxedo support that can help it be a smoother process as you're setting up your Luxedo. So first thing is what is calibration? Now, I'm not a Luxedo engineer, nor do I play one on TV. So I have an educated guess on kind of what it's doing and what's going into it without knowing actually what's behind the scenes. What it's doing, though, is the Luxedo has a camera and a projector. The camera's taking a picture of your house, and then it wants to, using some cool mathematical algorithms, it's going to try to combine the perspective of the camera and the projector so that the snapshot that you have is something that will work for your mapping project. So here's a picture of like the Lux Omni. You got the camera off to the side and the projector lens. And you'll notice that those are, what, 6 to 8 inches apart. And so one of the challenges with that, if we were to do this without the cool mathematical algorithms, is both of these lenses are coming from different perspectives, different angles of the house, and they have different lenses. They have different specs. They're not the same thing, but we're trying to mush them together so that they act like they're the same thing, so we can have a reliable map of our house. And maybe if I demonstrate kind of an absurd example, it'll help show what this mathematical algorithm has to do. Let's say we have our camera pointing at my house from this angle, and it takes a picture. And so this would be my snapshot. But if the projector was way over here, coming from this angle, if I'm designing my show on this part of the house from this perspective, and then I play it from this perspective, nothing's going to line up. It's going to be completely disconnected and ski-wumpus. So there has to be some kind of a little algorithm to try to meet there in the middle, to take these two perspectives and calibrate them, to coordinate them so that they can give you a reliable map, a reliable snapshot of your house. So that's part of the calibration process. It's taking this picture and the projector and trying to make them a usable single unit that you can have for a snapshot. Okay, so that's what calibration is. So it's something that you'll do when you're setting up the projector. To help it be successful and to go smoothly, there's a couple things to check. Tip number one is to check the connection, the cord that goes from the projector to the Luxedo. Now, if you have version 1, you can skip this step because it's already in the enclosure itself. But if you have Lux Omni, where they have the upgraded projectors, like from Optima, then there's going to be an HDMI cable that goes from the projector itself into the Lux Omni, the Lux unit in the enclosure. And so that's, if you're having trouble projecting something or having trouble calibrating, that's one of the first things I'll check, is make sure that HDMI is firmly connected on both sides. There's going to be a mini HDMI, so a little bitty one that plugs into the Luxedo unit, and then a regular HDMI that plugs into the back of the projector. Now, a lot of projectors will have 2 different HDMI inputs too that you can use, and so pick one. I honestly don't know if there's an advantage one over the other. If you don't see an image, if nothing's projecting, then the buttons on the top, there's usually something like an input source button so that you can go and make sure that you're on the right HDMI 1 or HDMI 2. So you can make sure that the projector is using the right one. Okay, because if that connection doesn't exist, then calibration will not be successful and you won't be able to project anything. Okay, so I'll check that. The next tip involves the positioning of the projector so that you'll have a good chance of success. Now, one of the things you're going to want to do when you put this projector, and this is again applicable only if you have the Omni, not if you have version 1, you want to slide that projector as close to the glass as you can. Scoot it forward in the enclosure Here's another angle of it. You want it as close to the glass as possible. If you get too big of a gap, then you may have a slight deviation in the angle of the projector, and you might even get some light from the projector lens refracting and glaring over to where it's affecting the camera. So scoot it all the way forward as close as you can to the glass, and that's going to help get better results. Also related to positioning, find a good spot in your yard where you think you're going to be able to get good coverage. You're going to have a light essentially shining on your house, and you want to put it in a place where it's going to cover the whole thing. This does not have to necessarily be straight on to the house. You can shoot at an angle within reason and then adjust for that angle when you're creating the show later. So just find an educated guess. Here in a little bit, we're going to actually shine a light on it so you can see if it's getting you the results that you want. You'll likely also need to raise up the back side of the projector. I hear people asking about this a lot with projection mapping projectors, is why is the image or the beam shooting up at an upward angle? And it's because these projectors were originally designed for, not for projection mapping, they were designed for home theater systems. So you'd have like a projector hanging from the ceiling, and they'd be upside down so that you could reach the buttons. And so if you have a projector hanging from the ceiling upside down, then they adjusted the angle in the projector itself to shoot down towards the screen. So we have to compensate for that. And so oftentimes the back of your projector is going to be pretty steeply angled up. You might also find that you're going to have to raise this projector off the ground to get better coverage. So kind of play around with where you want to have the projector positioned. And that kind of leads into tip number 3, is we want to verify that we are getting good coverage of the entire house, or at least the entire portion of the house we're going to project on. So there's a couple ways that we can do it. All right, to see if your projector is positioned correctly where you're getting the coverage that you want when you're first calibrating the projector, you'll get a screen kind of like this. And down here at the bottom, there's this slider that will just shine a spotlight. It'll just turn the projector on, so it'll shine a light across the whole house. And then that will allow you to kind of decide where you want to put the projector. And then you can kind of go back and move the projector around to see if you're getting the coverage that you want. But the farther back you move from the house, the more coverage you'll get. But the trade-off is it'll also get dimmer the farther back you get. So kind of move around with the projector and find where that sweet spot is, where you can get the most brightness and the best coverage. And again, you can go side to side. It doesn't have to be straight on to try to get something that's going to give you good coverage. And then I have a different video that you can look at that has some other tips on how to make sure that you're getting the most out of your show. And so I'll put a link to that somewhere. Now, as you're trying to shine this on the house and seeing how good a coverage you have, you might end up seeing a beam like this. It's in this weird trapezoid shape. This is what's called a keystone. A keystone, a keystone's got that same kind of a shape. You look at a keystone on a bridge or an arch, it's got this kind of trapezoidal shape. What that's effectively doing, I like to think of it as if I have a flashlight that I'm shining around, if I'm shining that flashlight from an angle, the spot on the ground that it's shining on is not a perfect circle. If it's from an angle, it's warped, or it's oblong. It's an oval shape on the surface rather than a perfect circle. Even though the flashlight may have a perfect circle lens, when it's shining on the ground, it's oblong. Whereas if you can shine the light straight onto it, then you get that perfect circle. The projector is really just shining a light on the house. And so if you shine that light from an angle, it's going to be skewed as well. Instead of a circle, you have a square, because it's a projector show, the 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels. It's shining a square light. And so if you come at it from an angle, you'll have a skewed beam. And you'll probably have a skewed beam just because we had to lift that back end of the projector up quite a bit too. So you might see something that looks like this, or it might be just the opposite. But fortunately on the projector itself, if you have the Omni again, then you can adjust that keystone so that it's square to the house. Every projector is a little different, but you're going to see something on the projector kind of like this. You'll see those little trapezoid shapes. So with that with that beam shining on the house, you can move these keystones around and you'll actually see this trapezoid shape shift until it gets square on the house. Okay. So that gets you the best coverage. You know where you're going to be able to have the projector placed. You know that it's getting the coverage that you want. The next tip, which might be intuitive, might not, is to make sure it's dark. During the calibration, it's going to shine a light with lines, different patterns on the house. And during the day, it struggles to be able to tell what the difference is between your house and what's the sky or what's a tree. And so if you do it in complete darkness, when it shines a light on it, it's going to reflect that light back when it hits the house, and anything beyond the house, like the sky, it's just going to shoot off into nothingness. So you'll have a good obvious contrast between the house and the surrounding sky. So make sure it's dark. You don't typically want to do calibration during the day. I think there are some exceptions. I've seen some people that near dusk have had better results, but generally speaking, you want it to be dark. This also includes any ambient light. Sometimes you can't help it if there's cars driving by, but you do what you can to minimize any surrounding light and turn off lights in the house. If you have lights on in the windows, turn all that out and get it as dark as possible, as consistently as possible. Tip number 6 is don't walk in front of the projector or through the beam during the calibration process, because that movement and that disruption of the light is going to mess with the algorithms. Similarly, tip number 7 is don't move the projector itself either. Just leave it be while it's running through its algorithm and let it finish doing its thing. Then once it's done calibrating, you actually can, it will take a snapshot. It'll take a picture of your house. And if it's not looking like you're expecting, now that you have the calibration, you could try a snapshot during the day, because at that point, I think it's just taking a picture. So calibrate in the dark, snapshot. If it's not coming out like you expect, then take another snapshot during the day. And to do that, when you log into the portal, you can come to projectors and choose your projector, and that's where a lot of these settings are. This is where you can calibrate from. Let me set my projector there. You can do the calibration, and you can do snapshots. When you click capture, it'll create a new snapshot, so you can take as many of those as you want until you get one that you like. Okay, so there you go. There's 7 tips to help you get a good calibration, which will lead to a good snapshot. And then you're off and running doing the fun stuff. Now one other thing too that I haven't actually tried yet, but when you do the calibration, there's a step in here at some point where you can shine that light for you for positioning the projector. I don't remember which step it's in, but as you're going through these steps, you can kind of look for that option to be like, hey, shine a light on the house, and that helps me position it. And it's daytime when I'm running this, so I shouldn't be doing my calibration. I'm going to cancel that. Now, if all that fails, there is Luxido support is really responsive, so you can reach out to them, and you can tell them, hey, I went through all these steps, so I've already covered these bases, and then they can look to see if there's something else that's going wrong. There's also some good knowledge base articles on their website that you can go through to see if the answers are there first. And there you go. Hopefully that helps you get through this initial hump of getting your projector up and running so that you can just start creating some cool magic on your house.